Welcome today to Thinking Ahead, Transitions Big and Small. My name is Leslie Thatcher. I'm a short woman who's a little past middle age with shorter length. I'm going to say brown hair, she, her, hers. And I'm the Director of Program Development and Strategy for the Transition Center at Perkins School for the Blind. I've developed and run programs with several of my colleagues here in the room. And I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk to you all about starting early and some of the tools and strategies you can use early. I think it dovetails very, very nicely with Robin's opening comments. And so with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to my colleague, Andrea.
Good morning, everybody. I am Andrea Rutherford. I am also, sadly, a short, middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair, short hair. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am the director of Compass, which is a program here at Perkins that is a 9-month virtual program on college readiness skills for college aspiring students who are in high school grades 9 through 12. But we're going to take that transition and scale it back a little bit this morning for our transitions big and small conversation. And I'm going to hand it back over to Leslie.
All righty, thank you. We're keeping ourselves on track today. I'm going to move this down here too. There, oh, that's so much better. With a couple of different laptops to keep us oriented to who's talking about what. Today we have some goals, and we want to think about introducing you all to dovetail with Robin's introductory remarks about some of the ways of thinking of how your child can begin to learn how to do the tasks that lead to a successful, effective, fully realized life for your now littles, but at some point they do grow up. And so we're going to introduce you to a concept called executive functions. And it's a core piece of the act of learning of pretty much anything. And as we become more and more independent to the greatest extent possible, executive functions really inform how those steps can take place and helps that student gain additional independence, problem-solving skills, and really elevate their skills to the greatest extent possible. And that's what we want, right? We want to elevate those skills, keep those expectations high, and then give you as parents and eventually your child, if appropriate, permission to say, so it's not really working though, what else could be going on? So you can ask more informed questions about the nuance of your child's particular approach to learning. We're going to learn about how that infiltrates different threads of learning at home and in school, and give you a bunch of tools, resources. You don't need to look at them all now. I'm just going to give you permission, but there's a couple of things we'll present as roadmaps that may be helpful to help you as a parent begin to consider problem solving. One of them, just a secret, Robin and I have worked together rather closely over the years, and there's some very intentional alignment in the work that we do. So that is a little bit about what we're going to do today. And let's see, Andrea's going to do the next slide. So you ready? All right, so we're going to ask you to put on your thinking cap a little bit and reflect.
Thank you, Leslie. So we want to start to think about, have you considered some things? So one of the things we want to think about is what are we ultimately setting our students up for if every minute of their day is designed and planned? So we often hear that from teams or from families as they get older of, I have this, I have this, I have this, and I can't step outside of my comfort zone if it's not planned in part of my day, right? So ultimately, what are we setting them up for? Oh, thank you guys. As the slides come up here. So thinking about that, because ultimately, things happen in life. Our schedules change every day, right? They're not always going to be the same. So if it is so structured or planned that we then throw off our students and they can't handle that adjustment, are they ultimately developing those problem solving and executive functioning skills, which we will get into more this morning? So that's one thing to start to think about. How are they participating in planning that day, right? And that's really important because we all plan our days. Yesterday, I did a webinar with a student who is now in his second year in college, and he shared how he ultimately plans his day, his week, excuse me. Every Sunday, he sits down and he literally plans out all of his entire week, down to, I have this reading assignment for this class. I'm gonna do that on whatever day, you know, he needs to do that. And he estimates how long that takes him to do, so that he has a clear understanding of everything he needs to accomplish in his day. He takes the ownership of it. He's not waiting for somebody else to plan that for him, right? Also, we heard this morning when Robin was talking, what's the value of play or exploration? That is very important for our students. It is for all students, quite honestly, but especially our students where they may need the tactual or whatever accessibility that they need, right? And the importance of downtime. Yes, it's important to be busy. It's important to be learning things, but it's also important to have downtime. What does downtime look for your student? And so starting to think about that. Also, feelings of discomfort. I'm sure as parents, I'm not a parent, but I work with many, many families. It's not always pleasant when things are not going well for your student, but what are they learning from it? There's always a learning opportunity, right? So how are we setting them up for success in all of those areas? Where do you find experts? You heard Robin this morning talk about working with the experts on your IEP team. Again, there's all those acronyms that we use, or early intervention. Where do you find them? Where do you start? So starting to consider all of these things is really important as you map out your next steps. Is visual impairment the only challenge? Not all of our students, that is their only challenge. Sometimes, and Leslie and I can attest to this in our program, students come to us and initially that is their only challenge that they identify with. But over time, they realize there may be other diagnoses that have not been discovered yet. And so we start to have those conversations of how do you work through that? So exploring all of it. It's not always related to the visual impairment. There are other aspects that could be impacting your student. And I believe, let me go to the next slide. So ultimately, today's idea. Executive functioning skills are crucial for future planning for all children. And what we want to convey to you today is it is great to start early. Don't wait till high school, which is the age group that I work with. It is a great opportunity to start to think about these now. Now, I'm not saying run home and start doing all these things, you know, with your student, but start to think about them in your day-to-day life and how you can implement them. And we'll talk more about it this morning, how you can implement them so that you can set them up for success to make that transition down the road easier. And I'm going to hand it back to Leslie.
Thank you. Going back to the topic of today's conversation, thinking ahead, transitions big and small. I want to relate this idea of executive functioning, which you'll learn more about briefly in just a moment, but thinking of how it will empower your student to gain independence, a greater sense of self, and an ability to make the transition from, for example, early intervention to elementary school, from elementary school to middle school to high school, and then a big jump that we'll talk about today into life after high school. These are transitions that shift not only your role as a parent, they shift the team who may be engaging with your child and you, and it may eventually shift the responsibility as appropriate onto your child, soon to be young adult, depending on how their pathway is charted out and what their transition goals are. So what we're trying to do is frame for you both that there's a process that you'll be going through in this journey that will eventually be a transition planning process for ages 14 to about age 22, depending on a lot of factors. But there's many transitions that precede that are absolutely just as important for you to consider. These tools will begin to help you map that out a little better. So with that, I'm going to talk about why are these questions important. I just gave you one good reason, right? There are many transitions coming. These ideas hopefully will empower you as parents to think critically about what is going on with your child, what may be related to their access to the visual world, and what may be related to their learning style, or perhaps an additional challenge they may have. And there's a million we could list out. We're going to give you a couple of case studies to kind of chew on. So we want you to think about that. Executive functions as a whole, and we'll define them in a moment. These are things that are often learned incidentally. And you've heard Robin talk about incidental learning. That's that learning that we gather, if we're typically sighted, from going through the world and figuring out the tulips are in bloom, it must be spring. Those are observations that we integrate into our sense of norms in the world, how to do things. Think of the very, let's say, dynamic nature of an elementary school classroom, where letters, outlines of how to write a paragraph, the map to get outside in an emergency are all visually represented, right? Those are incidentally absorbed by a majority of students. And as we start working into more complex ideas, some students generalize that very effectively, and some students simply do not. When I made my introduction, I neglected to note, I'm an executive functioning coach. I study this, I think about this a lot, and have seen it in a variety of settings. And so when I talk about this is common for all students, not just students with visual impairments. So we're talking about a broad concept that is particularly relevant to empower you all with today. So, and the key for you all is starting early by coming here, engaging with this community, being lifted up by Robin's amazing, inspiring words, and finding your people and your safe space so you're not isolated will truly help down the road. So these questions are important so that we can give you the power to advocate for your child and eventually empower your child, if appropriate, to advocate for themselves with a deeper understanding of themselves and as much independence and high expectations as possible. And this is a nice way to help frame some of those considerations. And we'll talk about it for days with you if you'd like. But today we just have another 45 minutes. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Andrea.
So the next thing we want to talk about is during school age, and it's actually the next slide, thank you. During school age, students in the K-12 system, all of their accommodations and everything fall under IDEA, okay, which is federal, it's across the board. So that is for schools in K-12 system. I want to make that clear. We talk a lot about this in our Compass program because oftentimes this concept of IDEA versus ADA, the American Disabilities Act, gets misunderstood. And I can see several people jotting it down. So this may be a new concept. So in the K-12 system, parents and teachers take the responsibility to identify and create accommodations. That's part of your IEP team process, right? Accommodations are provided to support the student's success. IEPs drive this process. And it is entitlement based, quite honestly. Then we switch, students then graduate from high school and enter college, the workforce, employment, whatever it is, and we switch to ADA, the American Disabilities Act. This is for college and the workplace. So IDEA is no longer in place for your student once they graduate. Under ADA, excuse me, students must self-identify at their disability resource office at a college or university. So having an understanding of what accommodations they need, why they need them, so that they can advocate for themselves at a disability resource office. This is something we talk about in our program a lot. Because many students I've heard say, I don't know what my accommodations are. My IEP team just tells me. Okay, well, I'm going to encourage you to think about that. Let's talk about what are your accommodations? Why do you need them? Do you use them? Sometimes there's accommodations listed and they're like, I don't even use that. Okay, that's fine. Why don't you need it anymore? Maybe you needed it at a younger age and you don't need it now. That's okay. But let's think about that in greater detail so that you can become a stronger self-advocate. And then also under ADA, like I said, they will need to self-advocate for the accommodations. We've now moved from entitlement-based to eligibility-based. And there are no IEPs in the college setting. No IEPs. That is sometimes misunderstood. We hear that from families a lot. And that a college may say, well, you can send it to me and I'll look at it, but we don't implement it. Because remember, under an IEP, you're receiving specially designed instruction. And in college, you no longer receive specially designed instruction from a provider like a teacher of students with visual impairments and OT, physical therapist, whatever it may be. So IEPs end once they graduate. And let's see. And I'm going to hand it back to Leslie.
Thank you. And the concept Andrea just introduced to you is a crucial one that I would say in about 90% of the parents we work with across our programs don't fully understand that when their child graduates, whether it's after a 4-year high school experience, 5-year up to age 22, that entire team goes away, and depending on the support needs of your child, whether it's state agencies or you, that's it. To help organize and create a plan and structured services in a college setting, which we primarily focus on in Compass, there is actually, the student is the lead role. So when you think of letting go and flying the nest and all those things, it's really like legal. So we, in the transition center that Andrea and I both work at, we're really beginning to unpack what these things are with wonderful programming, and we'll talk about that later. It's in our resource slides, but it's that important that we've created an entire center to help empower families earlier with these concepts. Now, though, we're going to just start a little gallop here. We're laying the groundwork, some of the additional conceptual needs that you have. And now we're ready to really dive in. We're on slide 8, and we're going to move a little faster for a few minutes. So I want to remind you all, and you've heard me begin to allude to this, there are many different paths after high school that may be appropriate for your child. Sometimes we hear in the media how important college is for future earnings and health outcomes and a million things. That is not the only solution. And I really want to encourage you. We can go to the next slide. Not that one. Huh. Okay, that's fine. We want you to begin to think about the range of options and the range of timelines to get to those options as your child continues to build skills and capacity. Okay, so there is employment. Employment can look a lot of different ways depending on what's appropriate for your child. It may be employment 40 hours a week in what we think of as a full-time job. It may be supported employment through job coaching, through job carve-outs, through other programming that allows appropriate engagement for your young adult to engage in the world at the highest level possible. We recognize there's challenge in some of those scenarios when we think of transportation. We think of individuals living in rural areas. We think of English language learners who may not have access to an employment scenario that may be able to absorb, accommodate, support in with some of those challenges. So I don't want to be, buttercups and rainbows here. But these are concepts to know exist. They're structured within state systems. And they may be really marvelous, appropriate next steps for your child. We don't know yet. Next is community engagement. That could be some volunteer work. It could be a range of different roles, again, supported by different organizations within your community and possibly state agencies that are aware of some of those programming options. Finally, we think of college. We think of things like community college is a marvelous first step. And there's many reasons why that may be a stupendous first step to dip your toe in the water of what rigorous academics may look like. It may allow time to build skills out of the super supportive system of the K-12 environment. Four-year college, tribal colleges, online college, there's a million. I could talk about it forever. But then there's also this other nugget that families may not know about. That's this whole world of training programs that all of the skills that Robin was talking about this morning, we think of as either related to tasks of daily living or independent living skills, right? As a basket of skills. And we all think of that, paying our bills, cooking food, going to the grocery store, having friends and going out to dinner, a million different skill sets that our children are hoping to, and we're hoping they may be able to take advantage of and learn the skills to do as independently as traveling on an Uber, which we do here in Watertown all the time, right? There is often not enough time in the K-12 setting to really learn all those skills and generalize them, learn how to tolerate discomfort if the Uber doesn't show up, they refuse your guide dog, the restaurant menu is not available in Braille and it's not online, on and on. We could go on forever with areas where our children need to begin to build up tolerance for some of the varied paths that they're going to go down. There's marvelous programs out there that I'm putting in a bucket called training programs that can happen both as enrichment programming throughout a K-12 experience. Perkins is called Outreach, and it's marvelous. You may have heard of it before. And in other states, it's named different things, but those are programs that allow students to begin to build these skills in a range of ways focused on their particular needs. So it covers a million things. So are you hearing that there's a wide range of opportunities and ways you can sequence your child's exposure to academic rigor, the benefits and the skill sets of a skilled TVI and support team in the K-12 environment, build more robust skills upon high school graduation, and identify then with that larger set of skills, self-awareness, greater maturity, right? Always a beneficial thing, to make more informed decisions about, is it higher education? Is it a certification program for a specific job, which is a big thing in the employment field right now? Or is it directly to some sort of employment? So I hope you can see there is no one right timeline, but there's a lot of different ideas out there that you can sequence out and consider as you're working initially with an IEP team and with your child as they become a partner in this conversation, if that's aligned with your child's skill sets and interests. So make sense? Okay. So this one's mine too. Well, this is both of ours. Okay. So we want to give you a couple stories. So one is consider a student who may live in a multi-generational home. And we work with a lot of students who work in multi-generation or live in multi-generational homes. There may be a lot of in and out in the home. There may be a great deal of support and love for this child, which is a beautiful, glorious thing. So I want to celebrate that right now. But I want you to also think of an environment where that warm, loving environment may also be doing everything for this particular child and not giving them those chances to make their own cup of tea and learn how to do that, to figure out how to create a system to get their backpack packed and out the door in a certain chunk of time, to time out their shower and clothing and sequence to get out the door. These are skills that sometimes well-meaning relatives, including us as parents, I'm a mother, I get it. I've been there, I still kind of am. So I want you to consider the impact that may have on that student's ability to assess for themselves their independence, their capacity to do these skills, or something that might evolve in the student that we call often learned helplessness. Okay? So there's my little vignette for you to kind of noodle on. Andrea has another one.
So mine is actually part of our program. In our program, we not only work with the student, we work with the families as well. And so I was talking to a parent one day, and she brought up to me that she was writing out her grocery list one day, and her son is blind. She has a large family. She has many kids, and she has one son who is totally blind. And she was writing out her grocery list, and somehow in the conversation, it came up, and her son said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm writing my grocery list, and then I'm writing my to-do list for the week." And he was very confused. He said, "What do you mean?" And she had this aha moment of, he thinks food just appears. He thinks things just happen. It never dawned on me that I have never explicitly said to him, I write out a grocery list. I plan my groceries for the week for our entire family. And then I go to the store and I buy what's on the grocery list. And he was like, "Wait, what? I didn't know you did this." And I want to remind you, my program is high school, so he had gone a long time before he realized that there's a grocery list and a to-do list for mom. So in our conversation, she realized, I really need to tell him more of these things because he doesn't have the incidental learning that we were talking about earlier, right? He doesn't understand that things don't just appear, right? Food just doesn't show up on the table. It came from somewhere. But he knows she cooks it, but he didn't know where she got it from. Another example was the student was making cereal every morning, and he was making it at the kitchen counter. So he's got his bowl, again, totally blind, got his bowl, got his cereal, got his milk, and then carrying the bowl to the kitchen table. Well, the bowl was never stable. It was always spilling. So then he was learning how to clean up after himself. So I said, well, let's scale it back a little bit. She said, my whole family does this. I said, right. But you have one person in your family who cannot see. The rest of you are typically sighted, right? So let's think of a different way we can do this. So he then switched to taking all materials to where he was going to sit, which seems really simple, but when you are so used to how you do it, she hadn't thought of that. He started making it at the kitchen table. There were no more spills. He was much happier because he didn't have to clean up milk and cereal every morning before he went to school. She was much happier because there wasn't a spill every morning. The time management got a little bit easier. She, though, I'm going to echo a little bit what Robin said earlier. She, though, was like, why didn't I think of that? And she started to beat herself up. That was not the point of the whole conversation at all. And I said, you didn't do anything wrong, right? Just sometimes we have to think outside the box. It is okay to experiment. It is okay to do things that you may have your child do things differently than how you do it. Do not beat yourself up. A lot of it is trial and error, and that is okay. And you may try one way and it works great. And you may try it a different way and it doesn't work at all for whatever reason. It's okay. So just thinking about some of those things as you move into the next stages. And I'm going to hand it back over to Leslie.
All right, so we're beginning to build the argument for executive functioning, right? So the connection between incidental learning and loss of incidental learning, tasks we take for granted, is sort of that intersection of executive functioning, okay? And so you now hopefully have a more vibrant sense of how those connections are made in day-to-day life for students we know. Okay, so the key is starting early. And I am going to dive into a little bit of background. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I want to get to the skills, but Andrea and I and some of my colleagues in the room have been working on articulating some of the barriers, not only to college readiness, but employment readiness for about 7 years. And we have come to understand the very complex system our students are growing up in that is designed to support families and students, and that sometimes there's some gaps. Okay, and that's a bit of what today's talk is about, to empower you to begin to bridge those gaps as an advocate for your child, but to also build some concrete skills you can walk away with. Our programs have created a lot of tools you can use out of the box, a whole lot of articles for an enormous range of students. And so we'll review those at the end. But mostly I want to go into just a brief, I'm just going to name the programs. You can look them up later, but I'm not going to burn time doing it. We have Compass, which is what Andrea directs, and we're working with families, educators, and students to raise awareness, increase expectations, and develop a timeline and plan that aligns with those students' transition goals, helping them move from I want to be an astronaut, or I want to work for the Red Sox, whatever that means, to more concrete steps that are aligned with the student's current skills, which is essentially executive functioning. We also have a program called Navigator and Pathfinder, which did not make it in this program, working in the same way with a range of different student profiles. My colleague Janine in the back is at a table and can describe these programs to you. So we also want to acknowledge that you may feel anxious and worried about what is coming down the path for your child. Just like the story Andrea just shared, you're busy. That mom was wicked busy, super busy. And often we don't have the time to sit and reflect and say, gosh, I'm going to spend a few hours ideating and, reading through different ideas of problem solving. No, we're trying to get dinner on the table. We're trying to deal with a child who was just, diagnosed with celiac or an ear infection, or holy smokes, Batman, how am I going to do this? My shopping list is going to have to change. I don't think I have the stretch for this, right? And many sandwich generation folks in the room, you've got older parents and yada, yada, yada. So we want to really acknowledge that. And I'm going to skip over this and just move into executive functioning. So the bottom line, we get life's complicated. It's hard to find the time. We want to make sure that we're giving you tools to think about making informed choices about putting clothes away. This is slide 16. What is the benefit of my doing that versus what is the benefit of scaffolded plan so that your child is increasingly empowered to do that on terms that make sense for them, with skills that make sense for them and systems that work for them, right? It may not be perfect. It may not be, the Better Homes and Gardens style room. That may be okay to move your child along the road of confidence, ownership, and independence to the greatest extent possible. And remember, they're learning skills in school. And then they're at home. Our students, it's hard to generalize the skills they may be learning with a TVI, a teacher of the visually impaired in school, or an OT in school, or a speech language pathologist in school, particularly if our students are also working with additional disabilities such as an autism diagnosis. Robin's story was such a just brilliant story of that young woman who her team allowed that young person to tell them what they needed even without words, and they were able to ebb and flow her services so that at the moment, learning visually related skills was less important than her primary behavioral and communication skills. And once she was able to reduce her anxiety and her stress, she was able to then launch with significantly more capacity to learn the skills Robin so carefully taught her, right? So understanding that some of our students can't generalize what their TVI taught them in school and bring that home. And that's what we're hoping to empower you with today. So we're finally into executive functioning. And I guess this one's mine. I'm just mindful of the time. All right. So here's a few concepts. We're going to introduce more. So by now you've figured out this is about planning ahead. This is about problem solving. This is about self-determination, having a sense of who this child is in front of you so that they can self-determine to the greatest extent possible with accurate feedback and sense of themselves. It's planning, the ability to prioritize. These are all skills that are quite complex skills and they take a long time to build. And so we want you to begin to think about these as you just go about your daily life. And I know I'm a geek about this stuff, but I think you'll find once you have a construct to think about, it'll be easier to implement. And we've got some really super brilliant resources that are easy to digest just on a regular basis, just hanging out on Instagram. So I'm going to do this one. So executive functioning allows us all to get here on time today. It allowed us to yesterday go, oh, heck, Bob, I've got to get to Perkins by 8 o'clock in the morning. I think I'm going to wash my hair tonight because I'm not going to have enough time. I wouldn't be talking about Robin, well. Executive plan. We might have had dinner last night. So it was thinking through all the pieces you needed to do, the shirt you needed to iron. Geez, I'm gonna need to leave 10 minutes early because I gotta get gas. And Boston traffic, all my stars, et cetera, right? Those are all executive functioning skills. You took the simple, it starts at 8. And you broke it down to all these little steps that also require that you have your purse with the proper credit card or cash, the key for the car, the right jacket, the shoes that aren't going to hurt when you walk around campus, et cetera, right? So we do this silently. And as you are beginning to surmise, narrating your life a little bit is a good thing, right? We've got to go to the park when we need to go to the park, right? Beginning to narrate some of those things. We're going to make spaghetti with red sauce tonight. What do you think goes into that, right? Those are opportunities, in the words of Robin, of so many ECC skills right there of accessing that recipe, measuring, understanding how steps and sequences happen. These are very powerful opportunities to begin to get that brain of your child's going and thinking in organized ways, even if they can't visually see that organization in all the measuring cups on the counter, or as they're learning access skills to read a recipe. If they love spaghetti with red sauce, what a terrific opportunity to practice perhaps an access skill that they may need, whether it be reading via Braille, whether it be listening auditorily, or reading in large print if that's their preferred format at this whatever particular age your child is. So components of executive functioning, I like to include visuals. This is a cute little visual. There's a billion of them online. But flexibility, cognitive flexibility. Honey, we're not going to go to Smith Park. We're going to go to River Park instead today. A child who has cognitive flexibility is going to be able to say, oh, that's great. There's a nice playground there too. Or a child with weak cognitive flexibility may have a meltdown, and that's also emotional regulation. Perhaps weak working memory because they've forgotten that there's the wicked awesome park at River Park and so on. So it's all interrelated. All right, I'm pretty sure this is yours, Andrea. Nope, it's mine. Okay, I'm gonna do one other thing, and then I'm pretty sure it's Andrea's. There's two, I found this concept, in one of my favorite books called Smart But Scattered, and I'd forgotten about it, and I've added it to my presentations now. There's two dimensions of executive functioning that Richard Guare and Peg Dawson talk about, who are the authors of Smart But Scattered, which is a mainstream publication. It's out there for parents. It's written for all sorts of different ages. They're Smart But Scattered for elementary school kids, Failure to Launch for the 20-something generation that is failing to launch. There's Thinking Skills of EF, working memory, planning, prioritization. You've heard me talk about these: time management, time estimation. And then there's the doing, the behavioral ones, response inhibition, not screaming at mom when she announces we're going to River Park instead of Smith Park. Emotional control, sustained attention, task initiation, particularly for low interest tasks. That's a crucial one. Goal-directed persistence and flexibility. And one of my favorite sort of widgets to use, if a teacher says, "Oh, you know, he's just lazy," I am like, hold on, Batman. That is not what I want to hear. And that's a big red flag for me to say, what else is going on with that child? What are they struggling to do of these things? And that gives us that mindset of curiosity that is going to begin to empower you as the parent, and hopefully eventually teachers, to think in a more complex way about what are the barriers to that child's ability to do what we would think of as being super easy. Okay, so I'm going to skip through these. These are in our slideshow that is up on the website, but I want to get to Andrea. Okay, this is one that I think might be particularly helpful. All right.
Thank you, Leslie. So as you can see, executive functioning, and you've heard already, executive functioning skills start early. And this slide gives some examples of how the breakdown between elementary, middle, and high school. Of course, this is not an extensive list. This is just to give you an idea. So in elementary school, you often hear students or parents, excuse me, I can't wait for my child to go to school and learn how to sit still for 5 minutes and pay attention, right? They start to learn that in a different setting. And again, it is different at home than it is at school. We recognize that. But learning to control impulses and behaviors, these are types of things that happen early on in elementary school. Some students need support with that, and that's okay. But supports can be put in place. Then we start to think in the middle school, learning to think and plan ahead by thinking about the future, a future point in time. You know, some you often hear, I just saw a reel recently where a little boy, the kindergarten class was thinking about what they want to be when they grow up. Of course, the little boy said he wanted to be a dinosaur. Everybody laughed, but then they showed him so many years down the road, he was in middle school, and he said that he wanted, I think he wanted to be a baseball player or something like that. So it changes over time, right? But they're starting to think about what might the future look like. Planning out their work, multi-step, starting in middle school, they're starting to work on multi-steps, thinking about it over time. Problem solving, that's a big one, as you've heard us say already. And then following a daily household or classroom routine schedule. And then when they get to high school, learning to think flexibly, another big one, right? And solve problems in new ways. Adapting to shifting expectations and rules, depending on the context, excuse me. So you can see over time how things change and expand for them. But again, our message is starting early with executive functioning. I wish I have counted so many times, but I don't have a tally of how many times we have heard educators and parents say to us in our program that, I wish I had thought about this earlier. I wish I had considered these concepts earlier. So it's always a great idea to start early. It's never too early to start. Okay. this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, missing the incidental learning opportunities. And I'm also aware of the time, so I won't go into all of these, but just again, like Leslie said, it's okay to talk out what you're doing, even if you think this seems a little silly. It is okay. It brings awareness to your student, your child, that, oh, mom does these things too, or dad does these things too, or grandma, whoever it is. If you're an educator, it's a great way in your classroom to share share verbally what is actually happening for the student. Okay. Yet students, like we said, with vision loss may miss the chance to integrate that visual learning into their own routines and preferences. So again, transferring that, understanding what that means to them. And they also may need to be explicitly instructed with lots of practice over time. Don't just say it once, right? They need to recognize, how is that important to me? Okay, mom or dad or teacher do that, but is that something I should be doing? So being very explicit about what that is, and even being explicit to, how does that relate to them? You know, this is something you can do one day, or this is, you know, this is something you could start doing now. Those are all really good things to start talking to them about. And we're back to Leslie.
Thank you. So this is a key thing I do want you to think about. Our students are complex in that they have a low incidence disability, as Robin has explained. Vision loss is low incidence and it's extraordinarily complex, just on the spectrum of the vision loss itself. And then when layered onto additional disabilities that may or may not be diagnosed, because often everything's blamed on the vision loss. And part of the underlying message here is it's not all related to the vision. It may have to do with lack of skill development because people haven't explicitly moved that locus of control into that student as much as possible. But we want you to think also about some additional elements that may impact a student's ability to learn. And this applies to all students. I want you to think about the role of a paraprofessional in a child's life, the language they're using in empowering that student to act on their own behalf versus the adult doing the thing, right? Moving that locus of control into the student, even if it's messy, even if they spill the water or the whatever it is, right? They're learning what happens when I do something and then what to do about it. Secondary diagnoses are another really crucial thing I want to think about. You've heard me mention that before. We often see these skipped over in IEPs. We often see limited to no IEP goals related to secondary diagnoses. And yet we see those being significantly impactful as a student creates their transition plan. And it's not being addressed at all. They're just focused on the impact of vision loss. And I really want us to think about advocating for those to be in parallel in IEPs as appropriate, adjusted, as per Robin's example with that one student. But other elements I want to think about are things like the environment that a student may be going home to, their perceived sense of safety, whether or not it's a predictable environment for that child or if it's an unpredictable or chaotic environment. You may have heard of something called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Events. Those are things that are documented through research that impact a child's ability to learn and move forward with their adult life. And we want to be mindful of that. Opportunities to fail and recover, thus spilling the water, being very cold if it is a snowy day and they chose not to bring their jacket. It's probably okay. They're going to learn what their preference is, not my preference or need to control. Trauma for students, we have probably about 38% of the students in Compass have what we call adventitious vision loss. That is vision loss basically after the very, very early birth, infancy. And often the students we work with have experienced significant vision loss in high school. That is a traumatic event for that child and their entire family system. And there are limited supports for those experiences. And we want to understand the impact of trauma and grief on one's ability to learn. Cortisol spikes in any one of these situations. Cortisol is our stress hormone that impedes our prefrontal cortex, which is where executive functioning skills live. And so when a student's not doing homework at home or presenting as not caring, bring that curious mindset. What else is going on? Right? And finally, really advocating as adults in this child's world for holistic support, holistic understanding of how that child learns. Is there auditory processing disorders going on? Is there some other thing going on? And the system is not great at the holistic approach. And we're here, we can see the impacts of a holistic approach to support even through a virtual program. And so understanding the impact of those is crucial. We on you, Andrea. We'll go through this.
Yeah, we're gonna go, okay. So we're gonna move a little quicker because I do know we are running out of time. So the impacts of limited opportunity to develop executive functioning can be cumulative. So learning to read, then reading to learn with fluency. We talk about that one a lot in our program too. But also with technology. So one thing, I personally, and I also neglected to share at the beginning, I am a TVI and O&M. I've been a paraprofessional. I won't get into all of it. So I've seen a whole lot of things. But as a TVI, learning technology early, getting technology in their hands as early as possible. Then as, moving along, I would even say getting a laptop in their hand as early as possible because many students are relying on an iPad. iPads are great, have a great purpose, serve a great purpose, but also being able to use a laptop as well. So, but also using it with fluency. And that takes time. So the earlier you start, the easier it is as time goes on. Independence, time management, organization, all really important things. Then of course, academics, being for writing, studying, learning, those are all things that take time and practice. Then as Leslie has alluded to, underdeveloped cognitive skills, can obviously certainly impact executive functioning, as well as other things. We've talked a little bit about learned helplessness and the lack of secondary diagnoses. This one we talk about a lot. I won't go into it in great detail, but reduce curricular challenges when students are ready. Increase the rigor for them. Always continue to set the bar a little bit higher at an appropriate time for them, right? Don't just settle for he's lazy or any of those things. Continue to set the bar at the appropriate pace for them. And then reduce challenges in courses. We often hear there's not as much reading going on or not as much writing going on, and continue to encourage those things for your child to continue to grow in those areas. The reading.
So this is my favorite picture of all time. I'm going to describe it. The reason we're emphasizing this academic piece is the complexity of educating our students with visual impairments. And we've used this term fluency very intentionally because we really want to make sure you understand fluency means fluency in tasks of daily living, but also accessing, storing, and outputting information. So reading is, one of the standard ways we do that, whether it's tactily, whether it's visually or auditorily, it's all the same thing. I want to go on the record right now. Reading auditorily is reading. Reading tactily via Braille is reading. Reading visually is reading. The thing I want you to understand though is that fluency is key, and that helps begin to build concepts, vocabulary, on as a student grows. And if they're limited by those early on, and they're still reading only via their preferred format at 35-point font and complaining of significant visual fatigue, there's a missed opportunity there for that student's growth. So, reading is key. We have 5 minutes, and I am going to briefly introduce the tools we want you to understand. The first one is one that Robin created, and I consider this a roadmap. This is slide 33. This is the Expanded Core High School Readiness Checklist. This is a roadmap and a marvelous tool to use as an advocate, with your advocate hat on as a parent walking into IEPs. It is age banded. It gives you concrete ways of thinking, they're progressing nicely. They're developing skills for as much independence as possible as they head towards enrolling in high school. It's a marvelous tool for you to begin to understand how to think critically about some of the skill development and advocate. We created a college readiness checklist that Robin also uses brilliantly, and that we use in our programming, and it's a formal transition assessment in states across the country. We have a Spanish version and an English version, and I encourage you to look at that. It gives us a goalpost. If a child says, I want to go to college, that's great to know that you're interested in that. I've got this tool right here. Let's take a look at some of the things we need to work on. Let's go through this. It really helps elevate the conversation and make concrete goals. And we've done a million other things with it too. But this is a wonderful resource. The link is both on this slide and it's in the resource page. It's a downloadable PDF. It's totally accessible and in Spanish and English. I'm going to skip over some of these. We might have an executive functioning section on that. I know that's a shocker. So what to do tomorrow? Right now, it's advocate for your child, learn through some of the tools we're introducing to you today, connect your long-term hopes and their long-term hopes with what they're showing you their skills and capacities, interests, and abilities are. Seek help, seek community, start narrating your life, give them options. Go to the resources Robin described that we have described. And the benefits are it provides you time to develop those skills and to see where things might be missing or where your child might be struggling, and you can begin to get additional support. 43, 44, 5. And here are the resources, 46. Both in the Transition Center, we have marvelous webinars, series, resources to build your fund of knowledge as an adult in a child's life, whether you're an educator or a parent. I'm so excited for these resources, and I'm so excited about the impact they're having on families already. We have a number of tools that I've described in this. The College Readiness Resource Center is a robust resource of videos, extensive articles on executive functioning, note-taking, the journey to independence, IDEA versus ADA. I could go on and on. It's very robust. We also have a technology competencies checklist, and of course, a link to Robin's high school readiness checklist. Beyond Booksmart is a fantastic Facebook or Instagram thing. They have awesome memes. I learn stuff every day, and I've been eating and drinking this stuff for like 15 years straight. So I really, really enjoy that. It's very digestible for parents. A bunch of other webinars. And finally, questions. I'm going to pause. Amy's probably got you've got less than a minute, but we're also around. All right, questions. We'll take one question, and then Andrea and I are around if you have additional ones. I'll bring this to whoever has a question. Yeah? Oh, wait, I need this, I guess. All right.
Hi, thank you. This was really great.
I'm so
Appreciate
glad.
it. I'm excited to hear about executive functioning as it relates to blindness. So my question is sort of similar to how often when a parent is seeking assessment for a child, and like neuro diversity issues. So I was thinking of like autism, oftentimes they'll come back and say, no, those are just blindness that you're seeing. And so recently with my child, we did get an ADHD diagnosis. So as I'm thinking about executive functioning, how often does, executive dysfunction and, I guess, how does blindness sort of impact executive functioning, often get misdiagnosed as ADHD? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So ADHD and executive functioning are like siblings. And they're basically on the arc of the same sort of cognitive functions, right? And ADHD tends to have a little more to do with an individual's experience with input coming in and not sorting it efficiently, sorting out the irrelevant stuff and only dealing with the task at hand. And I could go on and on about that. Often the same coaching approach and strategies are relevant for both. I would suggest that when a child has reduced sensory input, their brain may be hungry for additional stimulation, right? And that may be misinterpreted as ADHD. And I did not diagnose your particular student that you're talking about. I am not a diagnostician, but I have worked with a lot of kids. So I would just urge a broader consideration. The strategies are often very similar. And when we have visual impairment blamed for behavior, my red flags go up. And I say, what else is going on? I just keep asking that question. The field struggles with this, with accessible testing that is normed for students with visual impairment. There is a huge effort going on to make that more accessible, but anyhow, there's my answer to that. I know Amy's going to tell us we need to end. So we will, but we're around and we're around via email as well. My card's on the table, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody who joined us virtually as well.
Yes. Yeah, I do. Let us get out of this space. Let's crack it down. Guys, Ross, good job.